Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really pulling back the curtain on a financial crisis that is quietly reshaping, well, everything for American households. We're talking about consumer credit card debt. And we're not just looking at the problem, we're going to unpack a really specific strategic solution that we found in our source material.
And we should just jump straight into the numbers because the context here for late 2025, it's pretty shocking. This isn't just your normal cyclical debt.
Right.
No, it's a perfect storm of just sheer scale combined with a punitive cost that's pushing millions of people toward, insolvency.
Okay, so give us the hook. What are the core facts that really define this crisis right now?
You need to internalize two numbers, just two. First, Americans are collectively carrying over $1.23 trillion in credit card debt.
1.23 trillion.
A historic high. And second, and this is the element that just compounds everything, the average credit card APRs, the annual percentage rates, they're hovering above 20%.
20% interest on over $1 trillion of debt. That doesn't just sound expensive, it sounds, mathematically impossible for the average person to ever overcome.
It is. And that brings us to our mission for this deep dive. We need to unpack how this high debt, high interest environment is leading to such widespread financial strain.
And rising delinquency, I'd imagine.
Exactly. But crucially, we also have to explore this specific and legally sound claim from our sources that you can strategically delete this debt, or at least largely eliminate it.
Without bankruptcy.
Without resorting to the drastic measure of bankruptcy.
Okay, delete debt without bankruptcy. That is a bold promise. It sounds almost unbelievable. What's the catch?
The catch is specialized knowledge. The core insight here, the thing you need to grasp, is it's about shifting your perspective.
How so?
Instead of focusing on fighting collection calls, which is defensive and, frankly, expensive.
Yeah, and stressful.
And very stressful. You instead look at strategically eliminating the debt by understanding its legal vulnerability,
right?
Within the collection ecosystem. It's about leveraging your rights proactively.
Okay, so let's unpack this perfect storm you mentioned. Let's start with the mechanics of why paying off debt that has a 20% APR feels so impossible right now. It's not just the amount, it's the speed. Right.
It's purely mathematical, and it's really critical for you to understand this mechanism.
Yeah.
When you have this massive volume of debt, the $1.23 trillion, and you apply APRs that are consistently over 20%, the interest charges that get tacked onto those balances are just enormous, and they accelerate rapidly.
Our sources use this great phrase, ballooning at an accelerating pace. And that really captures that feeling, watching your balance grow faster than your payments can even touch it.
That's exactly right. And that rapid accumulation of interest, it leads directly to what we call the payment trap.
The payment trap.
Yeah. Think about your minimum monthly payment. A huge, disproportionate chunk of that payment. It just goes straight to covering the interest that accrued since your last bill.
So you're making payments every month, you're doing what you're supposed to, but you're often just covering the service charge on the loan. You're not actually touching the loan principal itself.
Precisely. For a huge portion of people borrowing money, this makes it exceptionally difficult to make any meaningful progress. You're not paying down the principal balance.
The debt just feels immovable.
It does. And that means your monthly payments start to eat up a larger and larger share of your income just to keep up. And that financially stretches you to the breaking point.
And we can actually see this breaking point in the national data, can't we? This strain is becoming visible as people they can't keep all the plates spinning anymore.
Absolutely. The strain is quantifiable. You can see it in a distinct upward trend in credit card delinquency rates.
So people are just falling behind.
It signals that individuals are hitting a wall. In this kind of environment, high interest, high balance, the data reflects systemic difficulty. It's the economy telling us a lot of people are starting to drown.
And once that delinquency starts, the whole process moves into a second phase, which is where the stress just becomes overwhelming. We're talking about relentless collection tactics.
That's the pain point. As soon as you fall behind on your bills, it just opens the door to these collection efforts that are specifically designed to feel overwhelming.
They want you to feel desperate.
Exactly. Desperate enough to agree to their terms, regardless of whether you can actually afford to pay.
So what are we actually talking about here? What are the specific tactics that collectors are using, according to our sources, that cause so much of this anxiety? It's not just phone calls.
No, it starts with the persistent and often, abrasive calls, letters, texts. But when those don't work, the escalation is real.
Okay.
Our sources specifically detail the risk of much more serious legal actions. We're talking actual lawsuits aimed at getting a judgment against you.
Which can then lead to what?
Devastating consequences, like wage garnishments.
And it's so important to acknowledge the human toll here. Even if millions of people are dealing with this, when you're the specific target of a lawsuit or a threat to garnish your wages, that's terrifying. It's isolating.
It feels like a full-time job just fighting to keep your own paycheck intact.
Right.
And that feeling of being cornered, it naturally leads to a central strategic question. And this is key to navigating the whole situation.
Which is?
Can debt collectors really pursue you for years and years? Or are there legal boundaries they have to operate within? Understanding that boundary is the first step toward taking strategic action.
So we move from just reacting to the collector's pressure to actually acting strategically against it. Does the law actually protect consumers who are already delinquent?
It does, and this is where that specialized knowledge we mentioned comes in. Collectors are bound by rules, most notably the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the FDCPA.
FDCPA.
Their ability to pursue you is constrained by things like the statute of limitations in your state, and critically, their ability to actually prove they have the legal right to collect from you in the first place.
Now we get to the core of this deep dive.
Yeah.
The promise of hope outlined in the sources. How to move toward debt elimination. If paying the principal is impossible and collection is terrifying, how does someone achieve this deletion you mentioned without destroying their credit or facing bankruptcy?
You have to stop thinking about it as a negotiation over how much you'll pay.
Okay.
And you have to start thinking about it as a legal challenge to the collector's standing to even ask you for money. The claim is that by leveraging very specific legal mechanisms, these debts can be, quote, largely wiped out or eliminated.
Okay, hang on. I have to be the skeptical one here. You're saying a simple letter can just wipe out a $10,000 credit card bill. If this were true, wouldn't every financial counselor recommend it?
And that skepticism is totally warranted. It really is. But you have to remember, the traditional financial system is set up to manage debt through payment, not to challenge its validity.
Right. Their goal is to get paid.
Of course. This strategy focuses specifically on a weakness that arises when a debt is sold off, usually to a third-party collector. This is where the whole legal process comes in.
Okay, so let's get specific. What are the 4 key components, the practical plan, that the sources say you, the consumer, must understand? Let's move past the abstract labels and into the actual mechanisms.
Agreed. It's a 4-part framework, and it's built on strategy and consumer law.
Okay, component 1, the plan.
First, you need a realistic plan for action. This means you establish a framework that takes you out of that emotional cycle of fear and into a calculated, structured approach.
And part of that plan is just accepting that paying 20% plus interest forever is a losing game.
It is. It frees you up to focus on the legal strategy instead.
Okay. Component 2, the core mechanism. You mentioned these strategic letters. What are they specifically?
This is the engine of the whole process. The key letter is the debt validation letter. And this isn't just a letter asking them to stop calling you.
Yeah.
It's a formal legal demand, often issued under the FDCPA, that forces the collection agency to prove the debt is yours and, more importantly, to prove they legally own the right to collect it.
That sounds more like a legal challenge. Why is that specific letter so effective against these big collection agencies?
Because of the third-party debt market itself. When the original creditor, let's say a big bank, sells that debt to a collector for pennies on the dollar.
Right.
The paperwork that goes with it is often messy, it's incomplete, sometimes it's non-existent. The collector gets a massive spreadsheet of names and numbers, not a pristine folder with your signed original contract.
So the third component, knowing your rights, means knowing you can demand that proof. You have a right to see that pristine folder.
Exactly. Your legal protection ensures that if a collector cannot provide adequate documentation, like the original agreement, a full payment history, a clear, unbroken chain of title showing they legally bought the right to collect from you, they cannot legally continue collection.
And they certainly can't win a lawsuit.
Absolutely not. This requirement is non-negotiable under the law. If they can't prove the debt is theirs to collect, the obligation, well, it often just disappears.
That fundamentally changes the entire game. And I guess that leads us to the fourth component, which is understanding the true nature of the debt. So what is that vulnerability? What's the secret?
The vulnerability is in the chain of custody. Once that debt leaves the original bank, its legal nature shifts. It becomes a speculative asset, something that's probably been bought and sold multiple times.
I see.
A third-party collector often lacks what's called locus standi, the legal standing to sue you. They might own a debt, but they often struggle to legally prove they own your specific debt and that the amount they're claiming is even accurate, especially after all that interest has been compounding.
So the strategy isn't about finding the money to pay the 20% interest. It's about uh, weaponizing consumer protection law, using a strategic letter to challenge the collector's actual ownership claim. If their paperwork is messy, the debt can be negated without further credit damage.
That is the precise mechanism. It's about fighting smart, not hard. It exposes the absolute weakest link in the collection chain, and it allows you to largely eliminate these obligations simply because the collector failed to maintain the required legal evidence.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive. We've really transitioned from, a huge economic crisis to a sense of strategic empowerment. To quickly recap for everyone, we started with the severity of the late 2025 consumer crisis, over 1.23 trillion in debt being compounded by these 20% plus APRs. It's creating ballooning balances and, of course, rising delinquency.
We recognize the incredible pressure of collection tactics, from the constant calls all the way to actual lawsuits and wage garnishments, which, are pushing millions of people to their breaking point.
But the strategy outlined here, it provides a really detailed path forward. It emphasizes using specialized knowledge, making a realistic plan, knowing your FDCPA rights, and especially using those debt validation letters.
To challenge the collector's standing.
Exactly, to challenge their standing and the debt's chain of custody. And this offers a really potent route to debt elimination without having to resort to the drastic measure of bankruptcy.
And that strategic approach, it leads us to our concluding thought for you to mull over. If simply understanding the legal vulnerability of sold debt and then employing a few specific strategic validation letters can negate major debt obligations, often without even needing a cash settlement, it raises a huge question.
It's a question about the value of specialized knowledge.
It is.
The mass consumer assumption is that debt is, it's an unbreakable contract.
Mm-hmm.
But if this strategic path is so effective, how much financial power are you currently sacrificing by not acquiring this kind of knowledge, especially in a system that is deliberately designed to profit from your continued lack of understanding?
The system assumes you'll panic and pay. But discovering these strategic vulnerabilities, it changes everything. It turns a terrifying financial obligation into a manageable legal challenge. It is maybe the purest application of knowledge translating directly into financial freedom.